South Africans, listen to me. Look around you. Look at our towns, our cities, our homes, our streets, and ask yourself, what happened to the promise of this country? We fought for freedom. We dreamed of prosperity. And yet here we are, still struggling while those who swore to save us live in comfort. This is the story of a secret empire, a network of power and influence that grew silently, quietly, and yet with devastating consequences. This is how the ANC lost control, how the dream of our nation was hollowed from within. It didn't happen overnight. Change is slow, corruption is patient, and those who seek to bend the system for their own gain are clever. We can trace the tracks back to the early days of democracy, when hope was fresh and the people believed. The ANC, the Party of Liberation, was supposed to carry us forward. They were supposed to build strong institutions, invest in our infrastructure, and create opportunities for every citizen. But somewhere along the way, the path diverged. Power became a goal, and loyalty to the people didn't matter more than loyalty to the party. You remember the scandals, don't you? The stories that shocked the nation, that filled our news with disbelief and anger. State capture. Yes, we all know the word. But what does it really mean? It means that people with influence were able to manipulate our institutions, bending government to their will. It means contracts were handed out not to those who could deliver, but to those who had connections. It means decisions were made in private offices, behind closed doors, while the public suffered. The Zondo Commission showed us just how deep this went, how systematic it became. And while we watched, ordinary South Africans bore the consequences. Take Eskom, for example. How many of us have sat in the dark, wondering if power would return? Rolling blackouts became a daily reality, not because of nature, not because of some unavoidable disaster, but because of mismanagement, corruption, and greed. We were promised solutions. We were promised competence. Yet our electricity grid crumbled. And the blame often fell on faceless administrators, while the people behind it thrived. And it's not just Eskom. Transnet, South African Airways, the very institutions that were supposed to drive our economy forward, they faltered. Jobs were lost, businesses suffered, and our nation's potential was stolen piece by piece. And let us speak frankly about individuals. Leaders who should have guided us, who should have acted with integrity, allowed themselves to be part of the system rather than above it. Decisions were made not for the country, but for personal gain. We saw ministers appointed not because of skill, but because of loyalty. Deals were struck with private entities that lined pockets while leaving the public to pay the price. And even when some dared to speak out, they were silenced, ignored, or forced out. The secret empire thrived because accountability was weak, oversight was compromised, and the people's voice was ignored. Think about the everyday realities for average South Africans. We see it in our communities, potholes that never get fixed, schools that lack basic resources, hospitals that struggle to function. We feel it in our wallets, rising costs, job losses. We experience it in our security, unable to protect the vulnerable, while resources meant for public good disappear into private hands. This is the cost of the secret empire. The empire that grew in the shadows while we lived in the light, thinking everything was fine. But this isn't just about anger, it's about understanding. To rebuild, we must recognize the depth of the problem. We must name it, confront it, and demand better. Corruption cannot thrive in secrecy forever. When citizens speak out, when the press investigates, when whistleblowers reveal the truth, cracks appear in the empire, and those cracks give us hope. South Africans, do not be fooled by promises or slogans. Power is not meant to serve the few, it is meant to serve the many. We must remain vigilant, we must continue to question, and we must hold leaders accountable at every level. The empire may have thrived in the shadows, but our collective voice is stronger than any secret network. We have the power to reclaim our country, to demand integrity, and to ensure that future generations inherit not a hollow nation, but a country that fulfills the promise of freedom. Remember, the story of our country is still being written. The empire that took root can be dismantled. Institutions can be rebuilt. Public services can work again. Opportunities can return to the youth. But it requires action, courage, and an unwavering resolve. We cannot sit idly while our nation is slowly eroded from within. The time to speak, to act, and to demand justice is now. We are South Africans. We are the people. And no empire, however secret, can survive the awakening of a nation determined to reclaim its destiny. And we must also look at the youth of our country, the very generation that was supposed to inherit the promise of democracy. Instead of opportunities, many face unemployment, underfunded schools, and a sense of hopelessness. Talented young people leave seeking brighter futures elsewhere, while those who remain are forced to navigate a system rigged with inefficiency and greed. How can a nation grow when its brightest minds feel abandoned? This is the silent cost of the empire. Dreams deferred, potential wasted, and a generation left to bear the consequences of decisions they had no hand in making. And what about crime? What about crime, South Africans? Crime thrives where desperation rules. When infrastructure fails, when services are neglected, and when ordinary citizens are left to fend for themselves, frustration turns into action. And often, the wrong kind of action. Children grow up witnessing corruption as normal. Leaders prioritizing themselves over the people. And every act of greed at the top sends a message. The system rewards cunning over honesty, loyalty over merit, and survival over integrity. This is the moral decay that accompanies the political decay, a reflection of how deeply the secret empire has penetrated society itself. We cannot forget the voices of the ordinary citizens, the mother waiting hours in a clinic, the father struggling to pay for school fees, the entrepreneurs whose tender was unfairly denied to favor someone connected. Their stories, multiplied across millions, form the invisible thread that exposes the empire. It thrives on our silence, our distraction, our resignation. Every protest, every petition, every demand for accountability chips away at its power. And we must remind ourselves that the true strength of the nation lies not in the palaces of politicians or the boardrooms of connected elites, but in the collective courage of its people. Finally, we must confront the uncomfortable truth. This empire will not fall by itself. Change does not happen overnight, and the path ahead is not easy. But hope exists where action exists. Where citizens refuse to accept mediocrity, where communities demand results, where young people rise to lead with integrity, where we refuse to allow the mistakes of the past to define our future. South Africa can reclaim itself, but it requires all of us, every voice, every hand, every act of courage. The secret empire can be dismantled, but only if we awaken, unite, and insist that our country belongs to its people, not to a hidden few.